Well, hello, Stephen Merchant, and you got nominated. Hello, Ladies made a big breakthrough at the Emmys this year in the movie miniseries, in the TV movie race. How did you find out the news, and how did you react?
I was in a cab on the way to a prestigious West End theatre where I'm currently doing a play, and my agent phoned, and it had just come through on the wires or whatever they have now at their agencies, a ticker tape thing. And yeah, he told me, and I was very pleased. I thought it was a nice sort of, a nice kind of pat on the back for the show, which I knew just from my own sort of anecdotal experience was certainly very well appreciated within Hollywood land, just from the producers and actors and people that have sort of in the business that have spoken to me about it and how much they've enjoyed it. So it was a nice bit of validation.
Mm. And it must have been somewhat a surprise when the year before you didn't get any nominations for the series. You switch over to the TV movie race and you get writing and a nomination. It must have sort of like the fact that last year you didn't get anything must have been a really nice surprise you got it this year.
I'm fairly pragmatic with these things, and once we'd finished the show, I was sort of moving on to new thoughts and new ideas, really. So in a sense, I hadn't really anticipated award nominations or anything with this. I just starting to kind of fade into the past. So it was a nice way of sort of bringing it all back, and whatever happens, I just think that the fact that it was in people's thoughts is a really nice testament to the work we did, and I think to the caliber of particularly of the cast and just the whole team. And it was hard to do that movie. I mean, we it was enormous fun, but we did it in we shot it in about 14 days. It was very fast, and it was intense. We tried to make it feel sort of cinematic and kind of hopefully it would work for those that hadn't seen the series beforehand. So like I say, it's just very nice to sort of feel like it was appreciated.
Mm. And what's a really interesting thing about this year at the Emmys is Ricky also is competing in the, he was last year in the comedy series races and ballots and things too. He also, because he did the Christmas special, moved over to the TV movie races and he got nominated as well. But it's like neither of you got nominated in the same category. It's like right. You got nominated in the TV movie and the writing, and he got nominated in the acting. So you're both, your work's both getting honoured, but you're not having to go against each other.
Well, yes, that's nice. I mean, it's you never want to compete with your friends, really, but at the same time, you don't really want to compete with anyone. I mean, it's always nice to be part of these things, and I have an Emmy here, which I'm very proud of for our work with The Office. But of course that's not why you do it. So it's nice, yes, to not have to have the anxiety of sort of competing with sort of close friends, but. I think both he and I always take it with a pinch of salt. It's incredibly nice to win, and it's certainly very nice to be nominated. As I said before, it does give you that feeling that you're sort of being supported, by the industry, which is very nice. But if one time we were both nominated at the BAFTAs here in England, and we were both nominated in the same category, and he won. And unexpectedly, they asked me to collect it on his behalf on the night. I wasn't even aware this was going to happen. So I'm sat in the audience thinking, and Ricky couldn't make it. And suddenly I've got to go up there and give an impromptu speech on his behalf for an award that I was also nominated for. So certainly I'm glad that that's not in contention.
Yes. Now, you said you don't like competing with anyone, but let's have a look at what your competition is in this race. You got Bessie, you've got Perot's Last Case, you've got Grace of Monaco, Nightingale, and Killing Jesus. What fitting company for Hello Ladies, the movie?
Yeah, am I making up the numbers?
I don't know. It's so different to everything else that's nominated.
Yeah. Well, I don't know. I mean, if I'm truthful, I haven't seen any of those pieces. I think I may have seen Poirot, but I haven't seen any of the others. So I would imagine that this category is normally won by fairly earnest dramas, of which it sounds like there's several. If you've got one which has killing in the title and Jesus, I'm sure that's fairly serious-minded. I would imagine Bessie is a very worthy and classy piece of work. So I have no illusions about our chances of winning. like I said before, it's just nice to be sort of patted on the back, really, by whoever decides on these things.
Yeah. You, now, Hello Lady started as a stand-up tour that you did that was a special for HBO. You then had a season of the show on HBO as a TV series, and now you've got the movie. It's had so many different sort of incarnations. Are we going to have a play next, or an album? Are you going to be competing at the Grammys next year for Hello Ladies?
Are you asking how many more ways am I going to beat this dead horse? Is that what you're saying? How many more ways am I going to squeeze extra pennies out of this idea?
No, your words, not mine, Stephen.
There's no more Hello Ladies. There's no Hello Ladies on Ice, or you know, Hello Ladies babies like Muppet Babies. But you know, it's a shame in a way, because we you know, we did have more stories to tell and more areas to explore, you know, in the world of dating, and so, you know, we put as many of those as we could in the movie. But it's a shame that it's a well that I don't think we've fully tapped. So maybe in future, you know, I can find other ways of exploring some of those ideas. I mean, you know, to me, you know, I grew up loving, you know, the movies of Woody Allen, and there was, for many years, you know, a lot of the stuff I most enjoyed in his stuff was about relationships and dating, and whether it was Play Against Sam or Manhattan or Annie Hall, you know, he played that furrow, and because it's just so rich and interesting, and I the idea of relationships, dating, searching for a mate, all of that stuff seems as fundamental, as intrinsic as any other kind of story to tell. So I can certainly imagine going back into that territory at some point, but just not in the Hello Ladies, you know, umbrella. But that was one of the fun things about doing the film, was we were able to approach it a little bit more like a movie, and we took it seriously. We tried to create it with the beginning, middle, and end, the arc that you would find in a film. And you know, nowadays it's very hard to find kind of romantic comedies in the When Harry Met Sally mold. And so it was sort of our chance of doing that, or trying to go into that sort of neighborhood. And funnily enough, it just occurs to me now that Nicole Kidman is both in our show and also in the Grace of Monaco, right? Is she in Grace of Monaco? That's her, yeah.
She might be, yeah. What do you think? Well, how did you get Nicole Kidman? How did that scene come about? I'm assuming you're just good friends with her.
Well, I'm good friends with everyone in show business, as you can imagine. We all just get together for barbecues and you know, time in the jacuzzi. But with Nicole, I'd never actually met her, and I got wind that she had been to one of my Hello Ladies stand-up shows in New York. And so when the time came to sort of, you know, to think of someone who was right for this particular scene in the movie, and the idea being that my character is trying to impress friends from back home in England, and you know, what better way in Hollywood to do that than to try and suggest to your friends, or maybe even have a romantic past with a movie star. And so Nicole was the sort of name that came to mind, and we just you know, I don't know even how we reached out to her, but miraculously she said yes, and just gave us, you know, a kind of afternoon of her time, which was incredibly gracious, because as I know from extras, these people do not need to do that for you. They are you know, they're slumming it. But she was wonderful, and she was just willing to sort of put her hands in our trust, really, and kind of, you know, comedy is not her natural universe, so she was very willing to just, you know, to improvise with us, and just, you know, and let me kind of improvise with her, and it was a blast.
With doing the film, what was, do you think, the biggest sensibility you had to change from doing the season 1 of the show?
Well, you know, we wanted to give a bit more backstory of the character. That was stuff that we were intending to kind of bleed out over time in the course of the series. So we ended up using a sort of a former flashback device that I think was a little less clumsy than regular flashbacks can be, but so that just filled in a few of the blanks about my character and probably made him a little bit more empathetic. But the main sensibility was just was approaching it like a film, with the sort of pacing and the forward momentum that a movie has to have. And actually, the first cut we had was about 2 hours long, and we ended up cutting a considerable amount out, just not because the stuff wasn't good, because there was loads of great stuff with me and Carl Mooney, me and Christine Woods, that I think was great, and also stuff with the other characters. but we just, you know, we wanted it to have that drive that a film has, and therefore it just has to keep moving forward, and anything that's not sort of serving the story has to go. Unlike in sitcom land, where you can afford to, I think, to be a little bit more indulgent and sort of sit in stuff a bit longer and dwell in stuff a bit longer, because you're not quite as propulsed by the narrative in the same way. So that was the biggest challenge, but also that was a nice kind of that was a nice constraint to have, really, and it sort of forced us to think in movie terms, and it also allowed me as a director to be a little bit more cinematic, traditionally cinematic, just in the way that we were going from scene to scene, and, you know, we started with like a sort of 2.5 minute, you know, single take, just to sort of announce ourselves as, oh, this is a little different from the series. This has got a bit more of a film approach.
Something that, like, to me, it seemed in season 1 of the show was a thought appeared, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, to be put into the songs you used to close out the show, and the music choices of Brian Ferry and Brett and things like that. How much thought was sort of put into the Jerry Rafferty song at the end of the movie, Days Gone Down?
Yes, the thought process about the music originally, which a lot of people have responded to enormously, because it was a lot of that sort of late 70s, early 80s kind of adult-orientated rock, yacht rock, as it's sometimes known. And part of the idea of that originally was that my character probably grew up in a household where his parents were listening to that. So to him, it was the idea of kind of adulthood and sophistication and the nighttime and sort of glamour. And so, pardon me. So when it came to the film, we wanted to just change that slightly, so there's a little bit more of a sort of a later 80s feel through a lot of the music. It's a little bit more harder edged, because my character is trying to get into this world of sort of the millionaires and kind of yacht parties, and we wanted that feeling that the music was a little bit more sort of a bit more of that kind of aggressive 80s kind of, you know, cocaine music, if you like. Not to suggest in any way that any of the musicians we used may have done cocaine, but, you know, the Phil Collins or the Power Station, it was much more aggressive, that sort of that saying. But we just wanted, but that Jerry Rafferty song was a song that we wanted to use in the first series, and we could never quite find a place for it. And it's just such a beautiful song, and it's a slightly forgotten tune as well. And I do love the idea of, you know, again, to evoke those 80s movies, like Tootsie. You know, Tootsie ends with a freeze frame and one of those sort of power ballads, and you know, About Last Night, the original version. They always used to end with often a kind of a camera would crane up, and some kind of ballad written for the movie would end it. So it was sort of it was like a little homage to that idea as well, and a nod to that. But also that there's a sort of romanticism to the music, and I often find in everything I've done, that if you sort of latch on to a particular tune and you can imagine that as being your closing music, even sometimes if you can't actually get hold of it, it just gives you a sort of it gives you a spirit for how you want to sort of conclude things.
And I guess with the themes of the movie, what was sort of your main sort of, I guess, what did you want to accomplish in, I guess, message or theme of the film?
Well, you know, the direction we were heading with the series was about my character having to mature, and the idea of my experience of LA in particular is that there's a lot of men who are sort of stunted adolescents. It's something I think that drives a lot of very successful, quite powerful people in the industry. The idea that they're still slightly trying to compete with the past. You know, the girls that rejected them when they were 15, the high school jocks that sort of kicked sand in their face. You know, I think there's still a lot of sort of competition with those people, and I think that was something which my character was always kind of struggling with. So we wanted to see him evolve from that and deal with that idea. But also my experience of LA was that there's a great many women in particular who reach a moment in time, not often around their 30s, where perhaps they came to town trying to be an actor, and you know, they were the prettiest, most talented girl in their small town, but they're suddenly in a universe like LA where they're just competing with the beautiful, most talented women from all over the country. And there comes a point at which they're not quite able to keep going with that anymore. Their dreams didn't quite come alive. So then it becomes like, what's your next chapter? And that can seem like a depressing thought, but to me it was more the idea that it's a very real thing that people have to contend with. And so that was the idea for Jessica to sort of, she's trying to deal with that, with this sort of what's the next phase of her life. So they were sort of, I think, observations about LA types, but I think that still expand outwards. I think those sort of people, I find them here in London and in any major city, almost anywhere. You know, I think there's that feeling of disquiet that people have now, particularly with the age of, you know, cell phones and things, where we can observe other people's lives on Instagram and Twitter, and we this constant sort of unease that there's a better life waiting for us somewhere else. And that was always one of the themes of the show, but we were trying to deal with it, but also kind of offer some sort of optimistic hope at the end. Because in the end, it was always going to be a romantic show, and it was always going to be a show about the sort of power of friendship and relationships and love and all those things. So that was why we sort of aimed for a happy ending. Spoiler.
Yeah, it seemed like the series of the show, Stuart was very focused on wanting to be with a girl, and he wasn't the best friend. He was looking for the supermodel, and then sort of at the end of the first season, he comes to that point where he leaves the supermodel, or the night with the supermodel in the skinny dipping, right, to go and be a good friend to his friend, and it seems like almost the message of the season one was a message about sort of friendship over chasing the girl. And it seemed like the movie in some ways built on that, where he's a better friend to Wade, a better friend to Keith, like inviting the boat party and sticking up for them. And it seemed like it really, he got a great appreciation for friendship. What sort of are you trying to say about the role of sort of friendship plays through the series and the movies?
You know, friendship is an area that I think is in a lot of the stuff that I've done. Certainly in the stuff I've done with Ricky. And again, I think it goes back to that idea of constantly peering over the fence at this better world. And that can extend to, that can be about jobs, and it can be about romance, but it can also be about sort of the circle you're in. You know, somehow the circle you're in not quite being enough for you. You know, if only I was with, you know, if only I was in the Algonquin circle, I would be happy. You know, just people finding themselves in positions in life, and still not being happy with it. And part of that for a series was about him coming to the realization that it's a lonely life that he leads. And in the first the pilot episode, it was very important to us that we ended with him alone. You know, and he has these friends, and if he can just sort of reach out and embrace them, it'll take away some of that loneliness that he's trying to fill by chasing these girls. And we echoed the shot that we ended the pilot in. We echoed that shot at the end of the first season, but with him now watching TV with Jessica, you know, just suggesting that friendship, that closeness is just a sort of balm in a very lonely city. And again, that was sort of an extension of it that we wanted to take into the movie, but in that instance, the friendship of him and Jessica kind of bleeds into romance. And unfortunately, again, because of the constraints of wanting to do it with a movie and keep the momentum and the pace, we couldn't sit quite as often as we'd like in the stuff with Wade and with Kevis. So they sort of became supporting players in a way, which was a shame. But again, it's just, you know, the nature of a movie is that it sort of tends to have a singular protagonist that is sort of driving things, and everyone else tends to sort of orbit around them. And so we had some fun stuff with Wade, which we just had to trim back because of it seemed to slow the momentum of the main story down.
Like I'm glad things ended happy for him though. That was like really relieving, even more so than Stuart in some ways, where at least often Stuart you sort of saw like he was the victim of his own scheming and his own sort of like Wile E. Coyote setting up the ridiculous trap and getting like hit by it. Like, yeah. Where
Wile E. Coyote is a good analogy. I'd never occurred to me before, but that's a perfect analogy.
Yeah, I think the great thing about Wiley is he's always got that hope. The very next,
going to make another go. Yeah,
nothing will keep him down. But yeah, so you've got this stuff away, this stuff with Keith, stuff. If you'd gotten a season 2 of Hello Ladies, would they have ended up in the same place where we saw them end up in the movies, or could it have gone in a completely different direction?
I don't think it would have ended up there initially. The idea in the season was to explore Jessica's as I say, sort of premature midlife crisis, and kind of see how she tries to deal with that and the various ways she tries to explore that, whether it be through sort of, religion or charity, or the various kind of her trying to search for answers, and kind of like an existential story for her. And, and for Stuart, he would have evolved a little, so he's a little less singular. And probably he would have ended up with a girlfriend, and it would have become some explorations of the difficulties he has being in a relationship, his anxiety about losing the girl and trying too hard, and then seeing Wade get back on the horse. So some of the same territory that was in the film, but we would have probably been able to really sort of burrow into all the little nooks and crannies.
Yeah, and I guess with the movie, you also had the benefit. I was in LA in November, and got to see a whole bunch of billboards with you shirtless on them all around the place. That must have been exciting to see around.
Well, that actually was not my body.
Really?
Not my body. For some reason, they pasted my head on another person's body. I guess I wasn't available that day for that photo shoot. So whatever your views are on that body, whether it's impressive to you or otherwise, or it repulses you, I can't take any credit or blame for that. But yes, it was quite bizarre, particularly as it wasn't my chest. Yes, but it was nice that they were supporting it. I mean, I have to say, when I first saw a billboard of my face on Sunset Boulevard, I did have my photo taken with it. I'm not going to deny. There's something for the scrapbook. But by the time you get to the movie, you say, well, I've been there, I've done that.
Yeah, it was like Lena Headey in the Game of Thrones final, a stand-in for the body. We got there's an awkward scene in the film, the sex scene, of having sex with a friend, but there's also like an equally awkward scene is a day or two later when he has to tell her that he's got feelings for her, and both of them are just these beautiful. What do you think is the more awkward scene of the two? The sort of physical sort of like exploration, or that sort of opening himself up and how he feels for her?
Well, the sex scene to me, I think having sex with someone for the first time is always awkward, whether you're friends or not, because it's quite an odd. When you stop to think about it, it's quite weird. I mean, you meet someone and maybe you've known them, I don't know how long it takes you to get someone in the sack. Let's say you've known them for 2 hours. But, it's pretty weird that, you didn't know them very long ago, you haven't known them for long, and suddenly you're completely naked with them. And the sort of mechanics of getting the condom, and do you have any, and where are they? And music, is there music playing? Are you concerning yourself with your iPhone, with your iTunes? A word of advice I have to anyone is never put your iTunes on shuffle, because you never know what tune might come up. I was lucky enough to be intimate once, and Bohemian Rhapsody came on, and that's a very intense piece of music to try and have sex to, because there's so many peaks and troughs, and inevitably you feel the urge to sort of go with the rhythms of it. So there's a whole kind of, I think there's a whole sort of, it's naturally kind of awkward and funny anyway, sex. So we wanted to try and tick off as many kind of aspects of that in that scene. But I hope by the end, I think I was trying to get the idea as well that by the end that there's a sort of weird, that in the end sex should be fun, and the fact that they're laughing and kind of giggling with each other by the end, I hope sort of breaks some of that awkwardness and reminds you that they're sort of, that they're friends, and that, because we did takes of it where it was very painful and where they were kind of almost combative. And in the end, the ones I went for were the ones where I think they were sort of laughing with each other. For me, I find that sequence very sweet. I have great fondness for that scene, and I feel like it sort of captured exactly what I was trying to get there. And similarly, the scenes, I'm very proud of the sort of moments of drama that we've managed to get in, and him declaring his feelings for her, and her kind of having to sort of find a subtle way of refusing him, and then him, her in a sense breaking up with him before they'd even got the chance to start dating. That was the stuff that was most exciting for me, and also one of the pleasures of being able to do the film. And with a TV show, we probably would have had to wait quite a few seasons before we could get to some of those beats, and to be able to compress them and was really satisfying. And I yeah, that stuff was the most exciting to play as well. This was scene where she says, you know, I can't be with you because you're sort of living in the past. Was a really nice scene to play and stretch yourself as an actor. And I'm proud of all of that stuff. And I hope that's one of the things that the Emmy people responded to.
Yeah, like I guess the stakes are so high when not even just turning a friendship into a relationship, but turning a friendship, having to reveal feelings and explore things like that and stuff like that, that it does create a lot of drama. And I think a lot of people can probably relate to what it's like to have to tell a friend, hey, I know we've been friends for years, but I think I've got feelings, and sort of the drama and the conflict and the comedy that can come from that.
You know, a few people have said to me that it was slightly more unexpected in the way that it played out, just because I think often in sort of romantic films, it feels like it's often the woman that's kind of the heartbroken one, you know, and it's the guy who sort of is a little more callous and sort of then kind of has to come to his senses and run through the rain to catch her, you know. And to me, it was sort of nice that it's not that she's callous, but that she's sort of on her own road, you know, and she's a little bit more assured of her romantic feelings, and he's the kind of the more vulnerable one in that situation, the one who's sort of emotionally a bit more inexperienced or a bit more fragile, which I thought was hopefully quite a nice way to play it.
And it's interesting, he was the one who was worried about talking to her because he didn't want to lose the friendship, and then he was the one who had to push her away a bit. Right, because just for self-preservation, yeah, you know, and that's the thing. I mean, you know, once you've put that stuff out there, there's no taking it back. It's you know, I think, you know, Seinfeld explored it with the idea of once you've said I love you, you know, that's a big matzo ball out there or whatever. And similarly, you know, you tell someone you've got feelings for them, whether that's someone at work or in your social orbit or anything, and if they don't reciprocate, that's there. That's just hanging in the air. That's the elephant in the room every time you meet them. And it's funny how, to me, you know, those are high stakes. They're very high stakes in life. And no one dies from it, and there's no explosions, and there's nobody. Jack Bauer doesn't have to save a town from a nuclear bomb. But in our day-to-day lives, that stuff is huge. I know it all too well, Stephen. I know it all too well. We got a couple of questions. This one, you said ask if I want to ask any personal questions. I'm thinking of moving to. I'm going to be in LA next month. What's the one tip you give for me in LA? What do I do?
The tip for LA is that you obviously need to be able to drive, but that LA, where where life is really being led, is sort of behind closed doors. It's not in bars and clubs and stuff, really. Like, the most interesting and fun part of LA is sort of, you know, people having dinners and just people hanging out. I feel like in London and New York, you could sort of go to a pub and you could just sort of meet people and you might have a fun night. And that's probably possible in LA. But LA, I think, is a lot more. It's a lonely city until you sort of get underneath it, and then you figure out your little circle of friends and the people that you connect with, and that's, I think, where it makes sense. So I think, you know, my advice would be don't be put off by the coldness of LA on the surface, because I think there's a lot to be enjoyed underneath. Particularly like me, if you're basically like a film and TV nerd and fan. And then you're in a town where basically everyone else is as well. And so it's quite nice to be in a city where everyone shares the same hobby as you.
It's the water cooler town, maybe.
Yeah. But providing the water, you only want to talk about TV and films.
Yes, which I do.
There you are, perfect.
Yeah. So last question. Do you believe in the one, or do you believe in percentages, Stephen?
I think I'm probably more inclined towards the percentages idea. I think that's, and again, I hope that was quite a fresh way of sort of ending a romantic comedy. Is that it's not about the person is perfect. It's that person is perfect in enough ways for them to take a chance. You know, and again, I think partly through the choice of the lyrics in that Jerry Rafferty song, and also is that it's not necessarily the idea that that life is perfect for those two now, but that it's worth a shot. And because there's too many romantic comedies that end with just the assumption that they lived happily ever after, and as we all know, that's where the real work begins once you've had that first kiss.
Unless they decide to make a sequel on that movie, in which case they've had to come up with a way that the happily ever afters, the wheels have fallen off the wagon and they need to put it back together.
Well, I don't think it's about. I mean, yeah, maybe it's the wheels off the wagon, but I think there's enough to explore in their relationship. Because in the end, a lot of the things haven't been fully resolved, particularly for Jessica. About what she's going to do next in her life, and again, that was part of the territory we would have explored. I think had we got them together in the series, was sort of just because you are in a relationship and maybe you love each other, but you still have different challenges. You're growing at different times, and one person being supportive of the other, and the challenges that brings. So there would have been more than enough to explore, I think.
And I think what you say about percentages. Sorry?
There's not as many yacht parties.
Yeah. And I think what you say about percentages is sort of true, because the couples we see, the ones that are the best couples you see, they have problems, but it's the ones that you're pulling your hair out with are the ones where you go, boy, most of the time they spend together can't be that fun. Like most of the time, they're getting 10% value out of this, surely.
Well, we had a whole sequence in the movie that again we had to cut just because it sort of took us down another road, but was about Jessica going on different dates and searching for the one. And every time she would sit down, at dinner or whatever, she would suddenly start to sort of scrutinize the other person and the way they sip their drink, or the way they cut their food, the way they move their hands, and sort of micro-analyzing everything and just thinking to herself, could I look at this for the rest of my life? And that she was constantly sort of, not seeing guys again because she was suddenly intimidated by the idea that I have to spend the rest of my life with this person. And so, again, I think that's something which a lot of rom-coms traditionally were always about, right? That, it suddenly dawned on you that that person was the one, and that sort of, there may as well have been sort of animated Disney birds singing. When actually, as we know, that, that's not the case. They are bound to annoy you at some point. But that doesn't preclude, love, and that they're the right person for you. It just means that there's more shading of grey than movies would like us to believe.
Well, Stephen, I don't want you to take this the wrong way, but I'd give this interview an 84%. You did well.
That's a high, because I was going to give it much lower.
Oh, what were you going to go?
Yeah, we were barely at the 40s.
Really?
No, okay. You did a killer job. I'd have given you like 92. It was just some of mine. I thought I could have been stronger.
Oh, really? So it's not that you're more mature than me and you're more like all those things that you're giving me a lower percentage. Okay.
Yeah.
That's all right. Stephen, it really was a really nice surprise to see how the ladies get into the movie race and the writing race. The Emmys. All the best next month with it. And thanks for chatting with us today.
Thank you, and thanks for having me on.
Okay, we are